AfriForum says it will petition the Correctional Services Commissioner to ensure that former President Jacob Zuma is sent back to jail. This is following a Supreme Court of Appeal ruling this morning which declared the decision to grant Zuma medical parole unlawful. Let's get the reaction now of Lawson, Naidoo, Executive Secretary with the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution. That's KSAC. A very good afternoon to you, Lawson. Thank you for your time and your patience today. Is today's outcome from this SCA the victory for rule of law that the likes of AfriForum say it is?
Indeed, this was a very important judgment of the Supreme Court of Appeal today, which really affirmed that nobody is above the law. The law must be applied equally to everyone, regardless of any positions that they might have held. And the court effectively ruled that the Commissioner for Correctional Services does not have the power or the authority to override or second-guess a decision of the Medical Parole Appeal Board. And we know that in the case of former President Zuma, that appeal board said that he should not be eligible for medical parole. The commissioner at the time overruled that decision and released Mr. Zuma, and that has now been overturned, and that decision has been declared to be unconstitutional and invalid.
Is it a full victory, though, without an explicit order by the court saying that, in fact, the former president should go back to jail to serve some time, depending on how much that is, whether it'll be the period spent out on parole or another sort of recalculation, shall we say?
Well, the judgment is clear, is that the position that Mr. Zuma was in before the unlawful decision to grant him parole was taken should now maintain, so that he should now present himself once again at the Escort Correctional Facility to resume serving his sentence. The court said that it was not within the ambit of the courts to determine whether any period that he spent on medical parole should be considered as part of his sentence. That it would be a matter for the Commissioner for Correctional Services to determine. But also that if there's going to be any further release of Mr. Zuma, it would have to be on the basis of a new application that would have to be lodged, would have to go through the same process of being considered by the Medical Parole Appeal Board before anything further can happen. So as things stand, Mr. Zuma is obliged to present himself once again at a correctional facility.
And say he does go back, right, and his legal team has maintained that he is indeed an elderly and sick man. How much does it matter that he, for instance, serves time as an ordinary inmate? By that I mean someone who's held in a cell because of whatever decision, or B, that he's in fact taken to a correctional services medical facility, i.e. the prison hospital. Does that matter at all, do you think, where he would serve the remainder?
Whether he serves a sentence, in a prison facility or in a medical facility within the Correctional Services Department is a matter for the Department of Correctional Services to determine based on the medical needs of the person concerned. But what the court was also very explicit in saying is that it was not up to the National Commissioner to take into account considerations that were irrelevant, such as the age of the detainee, nor the status as a former president. Those were extraneous factors that should have no bearing on whether or not someone is eligible for parole. And that is the affirmation and assertion by the court of the principle of equality before the law.
Government had defended, the Correctional Services Department at least had defended the granting of medical parole to the former president. In a statement today, the Correctional Services Department says this, Lawson, it says it respects the court's decision and will study the full judgment in seeking to clarify a way forward within the requisite time frames. Do you see them possibly challenging today's outcome?
Well, it's quite possible that the outcome will be challenged. Whether it's challenged by the Department of Correctional Services or by Mr. Zuma himself, we'll have to wait and see. But I think today's judgment is very clear in terms of how the law regarding medical parole should be interpreted, where the responsibility lies. And the court pointed out that the Medical Parole Appeal Board was established through legislation in 2012. In order to ensure that decisions on medical parole are taken by a body of experts We know that that appeal board is comprised of 10 medical doctors with the requisite skills and experience to make a determination of eligibility for medical parole. And that's an important factor now, that the hands of the Commissioner for Correctional Services are tied. That if the parole board said there is no grounds, there's nothing further that the Commissioner can do. If they say that a prisoner is entitled to medical parole, then the Commissioner has to satisfy himself or herself that all the procedural steps have been properly followed.
Lastly, Lawson, last July, when the unrest began in KwaZulu-Natal, it was initially blamed, of course, on the jailing of the former president. Are you concerned that we could see a resurgence this time round, with the court saying he should in fact go back and government or correctional services should determine how much time he should spend there?
Well, I think on the first point, the court once again said that those are extraneous considerations that should have no bearing on the decision or not as to whether to grant medical parole. If Mr. Zuma goes back to prison, it's up to the state, to the security services within the state to ensure that there is not a repeat of the violence that we saw in July 2021.
Lawson Naidoo from KSAC, good to speak to you. Thank you.